ever looked at your life on paper and thought, this should feel good, while something inside you quietly answers, it doesn't? You did the things. You climbed the ladder. You held the relationship together. You saved. You planned. You performed. And yet, when the noise dies down and the Sunday quiet arrive, there's a thin ache beneath the rib cage. Not sadness. Not exactly. More like a space where meaning should be. Inner drought. Carl Jung noticed this long before our era of glowing screens and endless goals. He described a kind of Sunday neurosis, the discomfort that surfaces when duties stop. Achievements sit quietly in a row, and the soul finally has room to speak. It doesn't accuse you of failure. It asks a more unsettling question. Whose life have you been living? From the outside, everything gleams. On the inside, the air is thin. You can feel it in small moments. The promotion lands and tastes like cardboard. The photo gets likes, and you scroll anyway. The home is beautiful, and somehow you avoid the mirror. Your calendar is full, but your heart is busy elsewhere, negotiating with a silence you can't quite name. There is a reason. It isn't ingratitude. It isn't weakness. It isn't a problem more achievement can solve. Jung would say, a mask has been working overtime. In his language, the persona, the polished face we present to the world, has done its job so well that it started doing your job. It chose for you. It spoke for you. It kept you safe and socially rewarded while quietly edging your deeper self out of the frame. The result? A life that looks perfect and fits poorly. A golden prison. Bright bars, velvet walls, no air. Listen closely to the symptoms of that airless room. You wake up on time but not awake. Your laughter lands a fraction late. Rest feels like idling at a red light. Stuck, impatient, already planning the next turn. Pleasure registers, but joy refuses to bloom. People say, you're so fortunate. And you nod, because they're right. And also, somehow, they are not. Here is the non-negotiable truth. Delivered with care, what you ignore within will not politely disappear. As Jung observed, what is left unconscious begins to show up as fate, as patterns, crises, stray decisions that don't make sense until you notice who's driving them. The soul doesn't write essays. It sends signals. It tightens the chest. It scrapes energy off the surface of your days. It nudges, then knocks, then floods. So let's set a clear intent for this journey. We're not here to shame the life you built. We're here to reclaim the one that got paved over by expectation. We'll do it slowly, honestly, without slogans. No quick fix optimism, no aesthetic spirituality, just the solid work of turning toward yourself. Tonight, I'm asking you to hold one question gently. If your life were a beautifully staged room, which object doesn't belong to you? Because the moment you can name it, you can begin to move it. In the next part, we'll step onto the threshold Jung called the turning point of life. The moment when success stops being a prize and becomes a mirror. We'll map where you are on that arc and why the timing of this ache is not random at all, but precisely, even mercifully. Let's get started. There comes a moment in every honest life when the direction of growth quietly reverses. It's subtle at first, a question that won't go away, a fatigue that no sleep fixes, but eventually, it becomes unmistakable. Carl Jung called this moment the Wendepunkt des Lebens, the turning point of life. It isn't marked by birthdays or milestones. It's marked by a deeper event when what once gave you meaning stops working. Up until now, most of your energy has gone outward. You built, you achieved, you became dependable, admirable, functional. You did what society asked, because that's how the first half of life works. You needed a structure, a role, a name. That's how the ego takes form. But Jung saw that at some point, usually around the middle decades of life, something inside begins to rebel. The soul, long patient, starts tugging at the sleeve of your perfect order. It whispers, "Now that you've proven yourself, what will you live for?" It's not a question of success anymore. It's a question of self. And this is the paradox. The turning point doesn't arrive in failure. It arrives in achievement. When the external scaffolding is finally built, the inner foundation gets tested. You look around and realize you've reached the summit. But the air is thin because you climbed someone else's mountain. That's why many people at this stage feel a restlessness they can't name. They start making impulsive changes. New jobs, new hobbies, new partners, new diets, thinking the right adjustment will fill the ache. But the soul isn't asking for new scenery. It's asking for a new axis around which life revolves. Jung warned that resisting this phase leads to spiritual illness, what he called psychic stagnation. You can keep achieving, but meaning keeps leaking through the cracks. You can polish the image, but the mirror fogs over from the inside. So what's happening, really? The outer identity you've spent decades maintaining, the persona, is meeting its natural limit. It's done its job. It got you here, but it cannot take you further. From this point forward, the question is not, who should I be? But, who am I beneath the mask? And that's where most people hesitate, because behind the mask lies the unknown. It's messy. It's raw. It's full of parts you've ignored, dismissed, or denied. But it's also where your vitality has been hiding. This is the threshold Jung described as the second half of life, not a time measured in years, but in courage. It's when you begin to shift from chasing status to seeking meaning, from constructing identity to discovering essence. If you've been feeling a quiet emptiness lately, if achievements taste dull and routines blur together, this may not be a crisis. It may be the soul signaling that it's time to turn. You are not broken. You're being invited. So before we move on, take a breath and ask yourself, is the path I'm on still alive? Or just familiar? In the next part, we'll explore what Jung saw beneath this turning point, the deep conflict between the persona and the self, and how this inner tension silently shapes the feeling of emptiness, even in a life that looks perfect from the outside. Deep beneath the surface of our lives, there is a silent war being fought. It's not between good and evil or success and failure, but between two forces that once worked together and now drift apart, the persona and the self. Jung described the persona as the mask you wear to meet the world. It's the version of you that knows how to behave, how to smile, how to fit. It's shaped by what earns approval, by what avoids shame. In childhood, it's formed to keep you safe. In adulthood, it becomes the social armor that lets you function. And for a long time, that armor serves you well. It helps you find belonging, stability, admiration. It allows you to play your part in society's grand theater. But the longer you wear it, the heavier it becomes. Because behind that mask, the self, the living, breathing essence of who you truly are, waits. At first, the self whispers. It visits in dreams you quickly forget. It speaks through small urges, a desire to paint again, to be quiet, to walk away from noise. You ignore it because there's no time, and besides, the mask has always worked before. But over time, the self grows restless. It starts to leak through in strange ways, in fatigue that doesn't make sense, in irritations that seem trivial, in moments when success feels hollow and joy feels borrowed. These are not flaws. They are flare signals from your own depths, warning you that you've mistaken performance for purpose. The more you identify with the mask, as the perfect parent, the admired professional, the reliable friend, the more your true self is exiled, and exile turns the soul into a ghost that haunts its own house. You walk through your days, smiling, efficient, praised, but somewhere inside, something keeps knocking on a locked door. Jung once said, "The persona is what someone is not, but what one and others think one is." It's a survival tool, not an identity. And when life is built around it, meaning begins to thin. Imagine your psyche like a grand house. The persona decorates the front room where guests visit, tidy, tasteful, always well lit. The self lives deeper inside, in the rooms you never show anyone, the messy, sacred places where truth sleeps. You can live forever in the front room if you wish. But don't be surprised when your dreams start rattling the doorknobs at night. The tragedy of many successful lives is not failure, but over-identification with the mask that once protected them. They became what the world needed, and in doing so, forgot what they needed. The emptiness that follows isn't punishment. It's the soul demanding reunion. So if lately you feel disconnected from your own reflection, if life feels rehearsed, if joy feels like acting dash, this isn't a sign to push harder. It's a sign to pause, to begin turning inward and listening to the self you've silenced for decades. When the self has been ignored for too long, it doesn't disappear, it waits. And when the waiting becomes unbearable, it begins to protest, not in words, but in symptoms. The soul speaks through discomfort. It uses the language of fatigue, of restlessness, of subtle ache. You might start to feel like you're moving through water, slow, heavy, detached. Tasks blur together, conversations feel scripted. You reach milestones, but there's no pulse behind them. And the silence you once craved suddenly feels unbearable. Jung believed that what we call psychological suffering is rarely an error. It's communication. It's the unconscious trying to correct the imbalance between who you appear to be and who you really are. He called it the symbolic language of the soul. Look closely and you'll see that your pain is strangely intelligent. It has timing. It appears when your outer world seems stable, because that's when you can finally hear it. It rises at night, in the quiet moments between distractions, when the mask is off and you are too tired to pretend. You might notice your body joining the protest, the sudden insomnia that leaves you staring at the ceiling, the tension in your chest when you say yes, but mean no, the migraines that appear on the days you fake enthusiasm, the fatigue that no vacation can fix. You may even find yourself sabotaging your own success, missing deadlines, losing focus, withdrawing from people you love. Not because you want to fail, but because some part of you knows that the structure you built is no longer yours. It's the soul shaking the cage. In this stage, many people panic. They label it burnout, midlife crisis, depression, and yes, sometimes it looks like that on the surface. But if you listen beneath the symptoms, there's often something sacred happening. A breakdown that is not destruction, but preparation. Jung wrote, "The soul cannot tolerate living in dissonance for too long. So when you refuse to face your truth, it will start creating situations that force you to. A job that collapses, a relationship that unravels, a health scare that cracks your denial. Each event looks like chaos from the outside, but from the psyche's view, it's an attempt at healing. Every symptom carries a message. You've been living outward too long. It's time to turn inward. That's why trying to fix the emptiness with more activity, more goals, more consumption, even more spiritual searching never works. The problem isn't that your life lacks content. It's that your life has lost contact with the soul. So if you find yourself restless in a life that looks fine, if you wake with the sense that something invisible is missing, don't rush to silence it. Pause, breathe, let that discomfort speak. It's not there to destroy you. It's trying to show you the way back. Because emptiness, when listened to, is not a void. It's a door. And beyond that door lies the hardest and most necessary part of the journey, the turn inward, the place where the mask finally falls away and what's been waiting inside for years begins to breathe again. In the next stage, we'll explore that descent, what Jung called the path of individuation, and why true healing isn't about adding more light, but about learning to walk courageously through your own darkness. When the outer life begins to crumble, most people panic. They change cities. They end relationships. They fill calendars, read self-help books, chase new highs, trying to patch the hole with noise. But the soul doesn't want noise. It wants truth, and truth often arrives as silence. Carl Jung warned that the void we feel after success is not a system error. It's a summons, a call to reverse the flow of attention from "What does the world expect of me?" to "What is my soul asking of me?" That reversal is what Jung called individuation. It's not a philosophy. It's a lived process. The long, slow integration of all the parts of you that were once pushed aside. The weak, the wild, the wounded, the unwanted. It's not a path for the faint-hearted, because before it builds you, it dismantles you. It asks you to step out of the roles that once defined you. It asks you to face the shadow, the parts of you you swore you'd never become. It asks for brutal honesty, to admit what you no longer love, what you've outgrown, what you've been faking for far too long. At first, this turning inward feels like death. You may lose things: status, certainty, admiration. Some relationships may fade when you stop playing your assigned role. Even your ambitions might dissolve, revealing how many of them were never truly yours. But slowly, as the mask cracks, something real begins to emerge. You start hearing yourself again, a quiet knowing beneath the noise, a sense of gravity returning to your chest. Individuation doesn't happen in a single revelation or weekend retreat. It happens in the smallest choices of your ordinary life. When you finally say no to what drains you, when you tell the truth in a room that prefers lies, when you let yourself rest without guilt, when you follow curiosity instead of approval, each act of honesty becomes a thread that leads you back home. And as you follow it, the emptiness begins to change shape. What once felt like a black hole becomes fertile ground, the soil where a new self can grow. Jung described this as a shift of center. The ego steps down, and the self, the deeper organizing force of the psyche, takes its rightful place. The life that once revolved around achievement begins to revolve around authenticity. You stop performing meaning and start living it. But even here, even after all this work, there's one last illusion that must be faced. The temptation to believe that you can keep your old life intact while becoming someone entirely new. That is where the hardest truth waits, that to be reborn, something must die. In the final part, we'll confront that truth with compassion, what it really means to let the old structures fall, why loss is not the opposite of growth, but the gateway to it, and how a life built around the soul, though quieter, is the only life that finally feels alive. There comes a moment when pretending no longer works, when you can't keep polishing the mask or patching cracks in a structure that's already crumbling. You realize, sometimes with terror, sometimes with relief, that the life you built no longer fits the person you're becoming. This is the moment Jung described as the death of the false self. It's not a literal death. It's the shedding of everything that kept you small, safe, and divided from your own soul. It feels like loss, but it's really liberation. Still, it's not easy. You might have to release things you once believed were permanent. A career that gave you status, but not peace. A relationship that looked right, but starved your essence. Habits that once gave you control, but now keep you numb. Letting go hurts, because these things were once your anchors. But now, they are weights. And the soul, once awake, refuses to live in chains. As Jung wrote, only those who have the courage to go down into their darkness will see the light. He understood that the collapse of certainty is not the end. It's initiation. The descent strips away what's false so that what's true can breathe. It is the dark night before dawn. Many resist this stage. They keep trying to bargain with the old life. Can I stay who I was, but feel different? But transformation doesn't work that way. You can't keep the mask and find freedom. You can't cling to your old identity and expect wholeness. Something must end so something greater can begin. This is the paradox of healing. You lose to gain. You die to live. You descend to rise. The emptiness that once terrified you becomes the open field where new life can take root. And the silence that once haunted you becomes the stillness where meaning finally speaks. When you stop running from the void, you discover it's not a void at all. It's space. Space for truth, for depth, for genuine aliveness. And from that space, a new axis forms inside you. One not built on performance or approval, but on alignment, the kind that can't be measured or displayed, but can be felt. Quietly, fully, unmistakably, you begin to notice small, sacred shifts, mornings that no longer feel heavy, decisions that finally feel clean, relationships that breathe instead of bind, a peace that doesn't depend on outcomes. This is what Jung meant when he said that the goal of life is not perfection, but wholeness. Because once you begin living from the self, the true center, you no longer chase meaning. You embody it. You don't seek approval. You radiate authenticity. You stop asking, what should I do to be enough? And start living from the truth that you already are. This is the quiet triumph of individuation, not a victory others applaud, but a reconciliation within your own soul, the return to the person you were before the world told you who to be. And that is why the emptiness was never your enemy. It was your compass. It was the signal that your outer life had outgrown your inner truth. The hollowness wasn't a flaw, it was a doorway. So if you're standing at that doorway now, trembling between what was and what will be, don't turn back. Step through. Even if you lose your old world, you'll gain your whole self. Because the life that waits on the other side of this turning is not the life you planned. It's the life that's finally yours. If this journey has spoken to you, consider subscribing, not just to a channel, but to a way of living more awake, more truthful, more whole. Every story shared here is part of that larger movement, the quiet return of people learning to live from the soul again. And before you go, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, honestly, are you living as who you truly are? Or as the version the world taught you to perform? Because the moment you can answer that with truth, the real journey begins. Thank you for watching. The next video is much more important. Don't miss that. I'll see you there.